Hi, my name is Joshua. Welcome back again to my channel. In this video, I will introduce us to the concept of data types in our programming. There are 6 in number. The first, vectors, lists, arrays, matrices, factors, and data frames. So these 6 can also be called an array objects. So most times in programming languages, especially in R, if you are to create any kind of object, we use 1 or 2 combinations of these previous data types we talked about. So the first of its kind is a vector. So what is a vector? A vector in R is a sequence of data elements of the same basic data type. So please take note of that word, same basic data type. So when you want to create a vector in R with more than one element, you should use the C function, which means to combine the elements into a vector. So it is important for us to use that C function. If you don't use the C function, you will find yourself in error. And I've shown this in the previous video we did on how to create variable. And again, in the practical section for this particular series, I will talk on this again extensively. So, but let's have an example. The example we have here tells us we are creating a variable called v, and we are using the less than assignment operator. So look at it. The elements we are storing in this variable are more than 1. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is why we are using the vector function to combine them together. So we might not need the vector function if the element we are storing in the variable v is just a single element. For instance, we are saying v less than 5. So we don't have to use the vector function. But in as much as you are storing elements more than 1 into a variable, you have to use the vector function. And that again is what I'm trying to show in the second example I have here, where we have a variable v assigned to store values ranging from 1 to 10. So the values in 1 to 10 are more than 1, so we have to combine them. Another example I have on the editor is I'm creating a variable called apple. I'm using the less than assignment operator, and I'm saying C, please combine the colors. So I'm storing the colors of the 3 types of apple I have, which are red, green, and yellow. And look at it, I am combining them using the vector function, and the result will look like this. If I run apple, I would have red, green, and yellow. So the simplest of the array object is the vector object, and there are 6 data types of these atomic vectors, also termed as 6 classes of vectors. So vector in R is very, very important because other things like the other array objects are built upon the atomic vectors. So most times the concept of vector is something that can never be underestimated. So that is why I decided to speak extensively on the theory behind vector, and also talk about the classes of vectors that we have. There are 6 in number. The first is the logical, which could either be true or false. The next is numeric. We have an example 6, 7, and 5.27. So it could either be continuous or discrete. And we have integer. So in R, if you are writing an integer, all you need to do is to put capital letter L behind that particular number. For instance, 5L means 5 as an integer, 65. 0L. So I intentionally add this, and during the practical section I'll show us just a few examples on the concept of raw as one of the classes of vectors that we have, and again the complex, how you could deal with complex numbers in R. And the last of these classes of vectors is character. And if you look well into this part of character, you would see that there is a rule here. When you are writing anything that is character in R, ensure it is quoted. So the quote could be single quote or it could be double quote. Just ensure it is quoted. When we get to some areas where we'll be dealing with how we could do some kind of matching, pattern matching, or dealing with words in R, we'll talk more about that. So let's talk about list. If you take your mind back to what we said about vector, we said vector just store object of single data type, single type. Now it gives some certain level of limitations, which list is now coming to like override and say, no, don't worry, if vector can help in this particular area, come on, use a list. So a list is an array object which can contain many different types of elements inside it, like vectors, strings, numbers, functions, and even another list inside it. So interesting, a vector would only contain one single type, but our list can contain many types. So if there are things you want to do and you're like, vector would not be useful in this particular work, so you can turn to list. And this is an example. I'm creating a variable here called C, and then I decided to use list because I want to create objects that are of different types. The first type is character, comma, numeric, comma, integer, comma, complex. And then I store it in a variable called C. When I print C, I have the result like this on my console, storing each of them in their respective types. And if I check the class of C, I would see that the class of C would definitely be a list. An example is what I have here. List stores each in their original data type, but in vectors they will be converted to a character. That's the way it is. So if you have something that is originally numeric, a variable that is originally numeric, and by mistake you add a character value to it, it turns everything straight into character. So this is an example. I have a variable, I'm creating a variable called D, and I'm combining them together with the vector function C, and then the first type is character for now, and then I say comma 25, comma, I'm using something complex. So if I check the class of this, everything turns to character, and this is what we have on the console. For now, 25, everything is now character, and the class definitely will be of character. So the class you are seeing here that is list is the class code I have run on the editor here. So please don't let that get us confused. So the last one we would take before we have a break and continue the next part of this series on data types in R is an array. What is an array? An arrays are the array data object which can store objects or data in more than 2 dimensions. So look at it. It takes vectors as input and uses the value in the dimension parameter to create an array. You could see how important vectors is again. So this is an example of how you can create an array in R. Just a brief example, and like I have said, in the practical section we will deal with each of these data types with real-time examples. So to create an array in R, all you need to do is we're storing it in a variable called A. So you say array, you open a bracket, and automatically the bracket gets closed if you're using Arrow Studio, and then you have the vector. You could see the vector that we are using in forming the array. The vector just have 3 elements, which is 2, 3, and 1. And then the dimension parameter talks about the row, the column, and the number of times you want it to be repeated. The number of times you want both the row and column to be repeated. So an example that I want us to practice so we could see something unique and something different again is what I actually wrote here. And look at the difference between the code here and the code above is just these two that we have here. And what does it mean? So if you run this, what it's going to give you is the frequency of row and column will be repeated 6 times, which is 3 multiplied by 2. You can just try it out. And so when you run this whole thing that we have here, you would have this 2 1 3 3 2 1 2 1 3 3 2 1 repeated 3 times, not twice here. I mean, a part of it is actually out of the slide. So note, when you see this dimension, what it means is a vector that combines argument for the row, argument for the column, and the last argument for frequency. That is the number of times you want both the row and the column created to appear. So I want to believe we've learned something basic right now on the first 3 data types that we have in R, the vector that stores objects that belongs to a single data type, the list that can store objects of any kind of data types, any class, and the last one is an array. And we have seen that an array is an object which can store data in more than 2 dimensions, and we will see the usage in subsequent videos when we get to the level of practical on each of these data types. So I want to appreciate you for your time, and for those of us that are watching for the first time and were here to subscribe, please kindly hit the subscribe button, and you can also turn on your notification bell, so when I drop the next video you would be the next person, the first person to get the information on that. So I want to say a big thank you once again. God bless you. Have a great day. Bye bye.